Hey crew, I'm back with some more Socrates. Today we're diving back into the works of Plato. But before we do, y'all make sure y'all get back over and show some love to Mr. David Horan at the Foundation for Platonic Studies. He has gone through the trouble of translating this and making it freely available so that I may bring it to you. And so, y'all get back and show some love. The link is provided in the description box down below. We are going to be in the Republic, Book 3 today. We have gone through Book 1 and 2, where we have said that God cannot be mean and God cannot tell a lie. So now let's see what we have to say about Plato's Republic, Book 3. Same people in the dialogue will be all right. Well, said I, these are the sort of things that should be heard about the gods, and the sort of things that should not, from their earliest childhood, by those who show respect for the gods and for their own parents, and not to make light of their friendship with one another. Yes, said he, I think we are now looking at this in the right way. But what if they are to be courageous? Must they not be told these stories and also the kind of thing that will make them least afraid of death? Or do you think anyone would become courageous whilst harboring fear within himself? By Zeus, I do not. I think that courage is in the face of fear doing what is necessary anyway, not the absence of fear. So there's that. By Zeus, I do not. What about this? Do you think anyone who believes in Hades and its horrors will be fearless in the face of death and will choose death in battle in preference to defeat and slavery? Not at all. It seems then that we should also supervise those who turn their hand to telling these stories and implore them not to speak ill of Hades' realm in such a simplistic manner, but rather to praise it, since what they are now telling us is neither true nor beneficial to those who are to become fighting men. We should indeed, said he. Sorry. So, we shall erase everything of this sort, said I, beginning with the following verses. I would rather follow the plow as a thrall to another man, one with no land allotted him and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead. And this, the houses of the dead lie open to men and immortals, ghastly and moldering, so the very gods shudder before it. And, oh wonder, even in the house of Hades there is left something, a soul and an image, but there is no real heart, a life in it. And this, to whom alone Persephone has granted intelligence, even after death, but the rest of them are flittering shadows. And the soul, fluttering free of his limbs, went down into death's house, mourning her destiny, leaving youth and manhood behind her. And this, but the spirit went underground like vapor. And as when bats in the depths of an awful cave flitter and gibber, when one of them has fallen out of his place in the chain that the bats have formed by holding on one on another, so, gibbering, they went their way together. And we shall ask Homer and the other poets not to be angry if we strike out these verses and others like them, not because they are unpoetic or unpleasant for most people to hear, but because the more poetic they are, the less they should be heard by the young, and by men who need to be free, and more afraid of slavery than of death. Entirely so. What is more, should not all the terrible, frightening names associated with these realms be abolished too? Names like Cocytus and Styx, the dead, and those beneath the earth, and other names of this type that make anyone who hear them tremble. Perhaps they are good for some other purpose, but we are afraid that as a result of such trembling, our guardians may become more excitable and softer than need be. And we would be right to be afraid, said he. Should they be excluded? Yes. Then words that have the opposite effect should be used in common parlance and in poetry, of course. Shall we also remove the lamentations and wailings of famous men? We must, said he, in light of the previous exclusions. Then, said I, let us consider whether we are right to remove them or not. We maintain that a reasonable man will not think that dying is a terrible thing to happen to another reasonable man, who is also his friend. We maintain this indeed. So he would not lament, at least not for that man, as though something terrible had befallen him. Certainly not. Well, in that case, we are also saying that as regards living well, a person like this is most sufficient unto himself, and in contrast to other people, he is least dependent on anyone else. True, said he. So, to him, it is least terrible to be deprived of a son or a brother or money or anything else like that. Indeed. So, whenever some such misfortune overtakes him, he laments least and bears it with the utmost gentleness. Very much so. We would be right then to take these dirges away from men of reputation, and we might give them to women, but not to women of substance, and to bad men, so that those whom we say are rearing as guardians of their country will be disgusted at the prospect of behaving like such people. We would be right, said he. And once again, then, we shall ask Homer and the other poets not to have Achilles, the son of a goddess, lying now on his side, then again on his back, then face down, then standing upright and Roman, distraught, along the shore of the unharvested ocean. Nor say, in both hands he caught up the grimy dust and poured it over his head and face. Nor have him generally wailing and lamenting in the whole variety of ways that the poets make him behave. Nor should he say Priam, the near relation of the gods, was making entreaties and wallowed in the muck before them, calling on each man and naming him by his name. But even more important, that we ask them at least not to have gods lamenting and saying, "Ah, me, my sorrow, the bitterness in this best of childbearing." And even if he makes gods act like this, he must certainly not dare to portray the greatest of the gods so inaccurately that he says, "Ah, me, this is a man beloved whom now my eyes watch, being chased around the wall, my heart mourning for Hector." And, "Ah, me, that it is destined that the dearest of men, Sarpedion, must go down under the hand of Menoetus, son Patroclus. For dear Adeimantus, for if our young men were to listen seriously to this sort of thing and not deride these unworthy utterances, they would hardly regard such behavior as unworthy of mere mortals like themselves, if it also occurs to them to say or do something like this. Instead, they would exhibit neither shame nor restraint in singing dirges and laments aplenty at the slightest mishap. What you are saying is very true, said he. Well, we don't want that, as the argument indicated to us just now, an argument in which we should place our trust until someone convinces us otherwise with a better one. Indeed, we do not want that. Indeed not. I am sorry. Nor should they be too fond of laughter either, for whenever someone yields to violent laughter, this sort of thing involves a violent change. I think so, said he. So if someone portrays any human being worthy of note as overcome by laughter, that is unacceptable, and it is even more unacceptable in the case of gods. More unacceptable indeed, said he. In that case, we shall not accept anything like the following verses about the god, even from Homer. But among the blessed immortals, uncontrollable laughter went up when they saw Hephaestus bustling about the palace. According to our argument, these should be rejected. You may attribute that to me if you wish, said he. In any case, it should not be accepted. But of course, we must attach great importance to truth, Indeed, if we were right to say earlier that although falsehood is really of no use to gods, it is still useful to humans as a kind of medicine, then it is obvious that something like this should be entrusted to physicians and that private citizens should have no involvement with it. Obviously, he said. It is appropriate then for those who rule our city, if anyone, to tell falsehoods in dealing with the citizens or in dealing with enemies for the benefit of the city. While it is not appropriate for anyone else to be involved in something of this sort, but for a private citizen to be false towards the rulers in particular is, we shall insist, as much, indeed a greater transgression than not speaking the truth to a physician when ill, or to a trainer doing a training program about the condition of his own body, or not informing a steersman about what is actually going on regarding the ship and the sailors, or his own level of experience, or that of his fellow sailors. Very true, said he. So if the ruler catches anyone else in the city lying, whether he is one who works for the people, either a prophet or a healer of sickness or a skilled workman, he will punish them for introducing a practice that overturns and destroys the city, just like a ship. Yes, said he, if words are matched by deed. What about sound-mindedness? Well, not our young folk need this. Of course. And for most people, do not the most important aspects of sound-mindedness consist of being obedient to their rulers and being rulers themselves over the pleasures of drink, sex, and food? Yes, I think so. Then I think we shall declare that the sort of thing that Diomedes says in Homer is well said. Friend, stay quiet rather and do as I tell you, and the connected lines. But the Achaean men went silently, breathing in valor, in fear of their commanders, and anything else of this sort. Very well. What about lines like these? You wine sack with a dog's eyes, with a deer's heart. And the lines that follow are these. And any other insolent remarks directed by private citizens against their rulers, either in verse or in prose, good. They are not good. Indeed, I do not think they are appropriate for the young folk to hear, not with a view to sound-mindedness at any rate. Yet, if they provide some other pleasure, that is no surprise. How does this look to you? As you say, said he. And what if he makes the wisest of men say that he thinks the most beautiful moment of all is when the tables are loaded with bread and meats from the mixing bowl, and wine steward draws the wine and carries it about and fills the cups? Do you think these lines are suitable for a young person to hear if he is to develop self-control? Or indeed, all deaths are detestable for wretched mortals, but hunger is the sorriest way to die. Or about Zeus, awake, alone, while the other gods, and humans too, are sleeping, quickly forgetting all the plans he had made because of sexual desire, becoming so overcome at the sight of Hera that he could not even wait to get her into the chamber, but wanted to have intercourse with her there and then on the ground, saying that he was never in the grip of desire, not even when they first consorted together, unbeknownst to their dear parents. Nor about Ares and Aphrodite being tied up by Hephaestus for similar reasons. No, by Zeus, said he, that does not seem suitable to me. But if by some feats of endurance in the face of all sorts of trials are spoken of and enacted by famous men, these should be seen and heard by our young folk. For example, he struck himself on the chest and spoke to his heart and scolded it. Bear up, my heart, you have had worse to endure before this. Entirely so, said he. Nor indeed shall we allow such men to be corruptible by bribes or be fond of money. In no way. So no one should sing the line that says, gifts move the gods and gifts persuade dread kings. Nor shall we praise Achilles' teacher, Phoenix, as setting the standard when he advised him to accept gifts in returning for assisting the Achaeans, and not to abate his wrath if no gifts were forthcoming. We shall not deem Achilles himself worthy of this, nor will we accept that he was so fond of money as to take bribes from Agamemnon, or indeed to release a dead body if he was paid, but not otherwise. No, said he, it would not be right to praise this sort of thing. And I am reluctant, said I, for Homer's sake, to declare that it is unholy to say all this about Achilles, or to believe it when others say so, or indeed that he had said to Apollo, "You have balked me, striker from the far most malignant of gods. Else I would punish you if only the strength were in me." Or that he was disrespectful of a river, a god, and was prepared to do battle against him. Or again, that although his own locks were already promised to another river, Sphericus, he said, "I would give my hair into the keeping of the hero Patroclus." Even though Patroclus was a corpse, we would not believe that Achilles did this, and we will deny that the dragging of Hector's body around the tomb in Patroclus, and the slaughter of the prisoners of war over his funeral pyre, it is true. Nor shall we allow our charges to be convinced that Achilles, the son of a goddess in Pellis, who was the most sound-minded of men, a grandson of Zeus, reared by the all-wise Chiron, was so full of confusion as to harbor within himself two opposed diseases: a love of money that ill becomes a free man, and an arrogance towards gods and men alike. "You are right," said he. "That we should not believe them," said I, "nor shall we believe, nor allow it to be said, that Theseus, son of Poseidon, and Perithous, son of Zeus, embarked upon such awful abductions, nor that any other child of a god or hero would dare to enact awful, impious deeds, the sort that are falsely attributed to them nowadays. Rather, we shall compel the poets to declare either that the deeds were not theirs, or that those who performed them were not the children of gods. But we must not make both statements, nor should they attempt to persuade our young folk that the gods give rise to evil, or that heroes are no better than mortal men. For, as we were saying before, these claims are neither pious nor are they true. Indeed, we have shown, I presume, that it is impossible for evils to come from the gods, of course, and what is more, that they are harmful to those who hear them, since anyone will forgive himself for being bad once he is convinced that such deeds are performed and have been performed by the near-sown seed of gods, close kin to Zeus, for whom on Ida's top ancestral altars flame to highest heaven, nor in their lifeblood fails the fire divine. That is why we should put a stop to stories of this sort, lest they engender a total indifference to degenerate behavior in our young folk." "Yes, precisely," said he. "So," said I, "now that we are defining the kinds of accounts that should be delivered, and the kind that should not, is there anything we have left out? We have said how the gods, demons, and heroes should be spoken of, and those in Hades too." "Yes, indeed. So what is left would be concerned with humans, would it not?" "Obviously. But, my friend, is it impossible for us to arrange this at the moment?" "Why so?" "Because I think we shall simply affirm that poets and prose writers do indeed speak ill of humans, beings on matters of utmost importance. They say that although they are unjust, many of them are happy, while the just people are wretched. That acting unjustly is profitable as long as it goes undetected, while justice is what is good for someone else but inimical to your own interest. And I think we shall forbid them to say this sort of thing, and direct them instead to sing and tell stories that are the exact opposite. Do you not think so?" "I know full well," said he. "In that case, if you agree that what I am saying is correct, may I claim that you have agreed on the issues we have been investigating?" "You have understood correctly," said he. "Now, Once we find out the sort of thing justice is, and how it is naturally beneficial to its possessor, regardless of whether or not he seems to be just, we shall then come to an agreement on the sort of accounts that should be given about human beings, but not until then. Very true. Well, let that be the end of our discussion of speeches. And in my opinion, we should consider speech itself next. Then our consideration of what should be said and how it should be said will be a comprehensive one. And then Adiamantus said, I don't understand what you mean by this. Well, you do need to understand, said I. Perhaps you will get a better sense of it from the following. Is not everything that storytellers or poets say a narrative of events that have happened, are happening, or are going to happen? Yes, what else could it be, said he. Yes, and do they not proceed either by simple narrative, by narrative that takes place through imitation, or through both? Yeah, I still need to understand this more clearly. I seem to be a ridiculous teacher, devoid of clarity. So, like those who are unable to express themselves, I shall attempt to show you what I mean, not in full, but by taking a particular part of it. Tell me then, do you know the initial verses of the Iliad, where the poet says that Chryses begged Agamemnon to set his daughter free, but that Agamemnon was angry? So Chryses, since he had been unsuccessful, called down curses from the god upon the Achaeans. I do indeed. Then you know that up to the lines, he supplicated all the Achaeans. But, above all, Atreus' two sons, the marshals of the people. The poet himself is speaking, and he does not even attempt to give us the impression that anyone else is speaking except himself. But in the lines that follow these, he speaks as if he himself is Chryses, and he attempts as best he can to make us think that he is the speaker, and is not Homer, but the priest, an old man. And all the rest of the narrative events about events at Troy and Ithaca, the entire Odyssey, has for the most part been composed in this way. Yes, indeed. Now, is it narrative? Is it not on the occasions when he is speaking the speeches, and also when there is an interval between the speeches? Of course. But when he delivers a speech as though he were someone else, will we not then say that at best he is making his own speech resemble that of the person who, he tells us, is about to speak? We shall say so. What of it? Does not the process of making oneself resemble another person, either in speech or in outward appearance, mean imitating the person one is making oneself resemble? Indeed. So, in a case like this, it seems that Homer and the other poets construct a narrative through imitation. Entirely so. But if the poet were not to hide himself anywhere, the entire poetic narrative would have proceeded without imitation. And in case you say once more that you do not understand, I will tell you how this may happen. Indeed, if Homer were to begin by saying that Chryses arrived as a supplicant of the Achaeans, and particularly of their king, bringing his daughter's ransom, as he was to speak thereafter still as Homer, and not as if he had become Chryses, you know that would not be imitation, but simple narrative. It would proceed somewhat as follows, and I will deliver it in prose, since I am no poet. When the priest arrived, he prayed that the gods would grant them safe passage home once they had captured Troy, and that they would accept the ransom and free his daughter out of reverence to the god. And once he had said all this, everyone else was respectful and cooperative, but Agamemnon was annoyed, and he ordered him to depart there and then, never to return, or else his scepter and the garlands of his god would not be enough to protect him. And he said that before he would relieve Chryse's daughter, she would grow old with him in Argos, and he ordered him to go away and not provoke him if he wanted him to return home safely. The old man was terrified when he heard this, and he departed in silence. But once he was out of the Achaean camp, he prayed profusely to Apollo, invoking the many names of the god and issuing reminders asking that to be repaid if any gifts he had ever given had pleased the god, either through building temples or sacrificing animals. In return for these, he prayed that the Achaeans would pay the price of his tears with the arrows of the god. That, my friends, is how a simple narrative proceeds in the absence of imitation. I understand, said he. Then you should understand that the exact opposite of this occurs when someone removes the intervening words of the poet himself and leaves only the exchange between the speakers. I understand this too, said he. This is the sort of thing that occurs in tragedies. You are quite right, said I. You have understood. And I think I am now clarifying for you what I could not clarify previously. That some poetry and storytelling proceeds entirely through imitation, including, as you say, comedy and tragedy and comedy. The kind that proceeds through reports by the poet himself, you would find for the most part in dithyrambic poems, while the kind that employs both is found in epic poetry and in numerous other places, if you understand me. Yes, said he, I now follow what you wanted to say then. And do you also recollect what went before, when we maintain that although we have already explained what should be said, we still need to consider how it should be said? Yes, I remember. Well, this is the point I was making, that we need to come to an agreement on whether we should allow the poets to compose narratives for us by using imitation, or allow them to imitate in some cases but not in others, and of this sort of cases we envisage, or indeed not allow them to imitate at all. I get the sense, said he, that you are considering whether we shall admit tragedy or comedy into our city or not. Perhaps, and perhaps even more than these. In fact, I do not know yet, but we should go in whatever direction the wind of the argument carries us. Yes, said he, you put that nicely. Well, Adeimantus, reflect upon this. Should our guardians be imitators or not? Or does this also follow from what we said before, that each particular person would be good at engaging in one particular pursuit and not in many, and if he should attempt to turn his hand to lots of pursuits, he would fail to achieve distinction in any of them? Of course it does. And does not the same argument also apply to imitation? Is it not possible for the same person to imitate many things as well as he can imitate one thing? Indeed not. In that case, he will hardly engage in any pursuit worth mentioning and simultaneously be an imitator imitating lots of things, when the same people cannot even do a good job of simultaneously producing two imitations that seem as closely related as comedy and tragedy, for instance. You did refer to these two as imitations, did you not? I did, and what you are saying is true. The same people cannot compose both. Nor indeed can they be good rhapsodes and good actors at the same time. True. And the same people cannot be good actors in comedy and in tragedy too. And all these are imitations, are they not? Imitations. And it seems to me that human nature has been cut up into even smaller pieces than these, so that it is incapable of imitating many things well, or of properly enacting the very things that those imitations resemble. Very true, said he. So, if we are going to save our initial argument, according to which our guardians, set apart from all other artificers, should be artificers of the freedom of the city in the strictest sense, and engage in no other pursuit that does not lead in this direction, then it is necessary that they neither enact nor imitate anything else. And if they are to imitate anything, they should, from their earliest childhood, imitate only what is appropriate to these artificers of freedom, men who are courageous, sound-minded, pious, free, and everything of this sort. But they will not enact nor be clever at imitating anything devoid of freedom, nor anything else that is shameful, in case they proceed from enjoying the imitation to enjoying the reality. Or have you not noticed that imitations that are continued from our earliest years and beyond become established as habits of nature, at the level of body, speech, and indeed of thought? Very much so, said he. Then those whom we claim to care for, and men who should themselves become good men, shall not be permitted to imitate a woman, old or young, railing against her husband, in conflict with the gods, being boastful about it, and believing herself to be a happy woman. Or when she is overtaken by misfortune, grief, or lamentation, and especially not when she is sick, in love, or in labor. Absolutely, said he. Nor should they imitate slaves, male or female, doing what slaves do. No, they should not imitate this either. Nor bad men either, it seems. Nor cowards, and those who do the very opposite of what we said, reviling and ridiculing one another, using foul language when drunk or even when sober, full of the errors that such people fall into in what they say or do themselves or others. And I think they should not develop the habit of behaving like mad people in word or in deed. For although they should be able to recognize mad and degenerate men and women, they should not do anything these people do, nor should they imitate them. Very true, said he. Well, they should imitate metal workers. Should they imitate metal workers or other artificers, or those who rode triremes, or those who shout orders to the rowers, or anyone else related to these activities? Indeed, said he, how could they? They are not allowed to pay heed to these matters at all. What about horses neighing or bulls bellowing, rivers rippling, the sea roaring thunder too, and indeed everything of this sort? Will they imitate these? No, said he, they have been forbidden either to be mad or imitate mad people. In that case, if I understand what you're saying, there is a particular form of speech and narrative in which the truly good and noble would tell the story whenever he had to say something, and there is also another form, unlike this one, that someone opposite to this man in nature and upbringing would hold to, in which he would tell the story. And what are these, he asked. I think, said I, that the moderate man, when he comes to the point of his narrative where there is some speech or action of a good man, will be willing to present this as though he himself was that person, and he will not be ashamed of this sort of imitation, especially when imitating a man acting resolutely and intelligently, and less so and to a lesser extent as he succumbs to disease, passion, drunkenness, or some other affliction. But when it comes to someone unworthy of himself, he will not be prepared, seriously, to make himself like this inferior person, except perhaps briefly whenever he does something useful. Rather, he will be ashamed of being so unpracticed at imitating people like this, and disgusted too at the prospect of molding and adapting himself to the behavior of people who are worse than himself. Unless it is just for fun, he is repulsed by the very thought. Quite likely, said he. So, will he not make use of the kind of narrative we described earlier when speaking of Homeric epic? And although his own speech will involve both imitation and the other form of narrative, will imitation not be a small part of the overall discourse? Or am I talking nonsense? This makes a lot of sense. This must be the type for a speaker like this. Someone, said I, who by contrast is not like this. The more debased he is, the more inclined he is to include everything in the narrative, and he will deem nothing unworthy of himself. So he will attempt, seriously and before large audiences, to imitate everything, including what we mentioned just now: thunder, the noise of wind, hail, axles, and pulleys, the notes of flutes and pipes and all instruments, even the sounds of dogs and sheep and birds. And in that case, will all this person's exposition be through imitation by voice and by gesture, or will it include a small element of simple narrative? It must include this too, said he. Well, said I, these are the two forms of exposition I was speaking of. They are indeed, said he. Now, does not one of these forms involve only minor variations? And once someone imparts an appropriate harmony and rhythm to the exposition, since the variations are minor, does not the person who delivers it correctly deliver it largely according to the same harmony? A single harmony, and indeed a rhythm that matches it in like manner. Yes, precisely, said he. That is how matters stand. And what about the other form? Does it not require the very opposite? All the harmonies and all the rhythms? If it too is going to be delivered in its own way because it has a huge variety of forms. Yes, this too is very much how matters stand. In that case, do all the poets or anyone who says anything fall into one or the other of these two types of exposition, or make up some mixture of them both? They must, said he. So what shall we do, said I? Shall we admit all of these into our city, or one of the unmixed ones, or the mixed one? If I am to prevail, said he, it will be the unmixed imitator of the noble person. And yet, Adeimantus, the mixed one is pleasing. And what is most pleasing of all to children and to people responsible for them, and to the broad mass of people, is the very opposite of what you are choosing. Most pleasing indeed. But perhaps you would maintain, said I, that this would not fit in with our constitution, because there is no twofold man among us, or a manifold one either, since each engages in only one thing. Indeed not. This would not fit in. And is that not the reason why a city like this is the only one where we shall find the shoemaker being a shoemaker, and not being a helmsman as well as making shoes, and the farmer being a farmer and not being a juror as well as farming his land, and the soldier being a soldier, not being a businessman as well as acting a soldier, and so on for everything else? True, says he. Then it seems that if a wise man, whose wisdom enables him to take on every possible shape and to imitate anything at all, were to arrive in our city, anxious to put himself and his poems on show, we would fall down before him as though he were a sacred object, a wondrous and pleasing one at that. But we would say that there is no one else of this sort among the citizens of our city, nor is it permitted that there ever shall be. We would anoint his head with myrrh, and give him a garland of wool. But for our own benefit we would ourselves employ the more severe and less pleasing poet, and the storyteller, who would imitate the exposition of the nobleman for us, and he would deliver the speeches in accord with the types we ordained by law when we first set out about educating our soldiers. Yes, indeed, said he, that is what we would do if it were up to us. Well, my friend, said I, at this stage, the aspect of music that concerns speeches and stories has been brought to a conclusion fully, since we have described what should be said and how it should be said. Yes, I think so, said he. After this, said I, what remains is the aspect that concerns the manner of song and melody. And we will pick that one back up next time. We're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, right? I didn't have a whole lot to add to this one, but this is a good natural stopping place, and so that's where we're going to do it. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion, and maybe just a little bit of entertainment to a not too complicated topic, right? We're just talking about finding excellence for the most part, right? We are talking about how a man can be excellent if he is doing more than one thing. And it is difficult. The more things that you devote yourself to, the harder it is to be truly excellent at any of them. I will probably never be excellent at anything because I divest myself in many different directions. I'm more of a jack of all trades than I am a master of one. And most times that's more handy to have than the master of one. But it does keep me from achieving a level, right? It keeps you from achieving the pinnacle. But no man ever really achieves the pinnacle, or woman. Right? That's not even the goal. The goal is to strive that way, but not really to achieve it, because achieving that is perfection, and perfection is impossible. Everything we do is flawed. That is the inherent nature of man. The best we can do is strive for it. And that is really what is being conveyed here, that the best that we can do is to strive to do the right, to do the just, to do the thing which we know we should, whether or not it affects us. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.